All right, Armando, go ahead and kick it off for me. Read that first. Actually, I'll read that first part. Sorry, I lied to you. So, Fuels Rebellion. One final result of Hamilton's financial plan was not a debate in Congress, but an armed rebellion against the government. From 1791 to 1794, farmers in Pennsylvania attacked tax collectors and burned down the government buildings to protest the whiskey tax. Someone tell me, where in history have we heard of something similar happening like this? Mr. Timothy, again.
Boston Tea Party.
Okay, Boston Tea Party is one of them. That's good. I didn't even think about that. Mr. Jesse. Shays Rebellion. All right, yeah. Farmers are also getting taxed. Man, farmers have a bad rep of getting taxed for some reason, and they end up doing the same thing. Looking at that picture, here's the description: famous whiskey insurrection in Pennsylvania. An 1880 illustration of a tarred and feathered tax collector being made to ride the rail. You'll see right in the middle that guy covered in like he looks like the Bigfoot. He looks like Bigfoot. They would cover them in hot tar. They would at least make sure they take off their shirt and cover them in hot tar. And then they would throw feathers on them, put them on feathers. And then when that tar finally cools, if you wanted to take off the feathers, what do you think he had to do?
Tear his skin off.
Yeah, tear his skin off. All right, it's painful. But this was still considered very borderline protest. When does it not become a protest anymore? Does anyone remember what we talked about?
When like it gets violent.
Yeah, when it gets violent. All right.
Not violent.
No, sir. It is not violent. Believe it or not. Yeah, that's like I say. It kind of straddles the line of it being violent. It's still considered a protest. And those poor tax collectors. All right, Armando, read off that number one part.
Many farmers were upset about the taxes placed on whiskey, not because they were wanting to drink it, but because they created it. In 1790s, farmers grew grain in Pennsylvania, but it was costly to transport. Instead of selling the grain, they made whiskey. It was easy to sell and transport. When the whiskey tax was passed, farmers protested to armed rebellion. Did I skip?
Yes.
Yeah, you skipped.
Farmers had difficulty paying the cash required for the government. Their actions intensified from protests to armed rebellion. Between 1791 to 1794, farmers harassed tax collectors and refused to pay the tax. In 1794, a confrontation between farmers and the tax officials resulted in mob violence and the deaths of several people.
All right, thank you very much. So, looking at that tax, they were upset about it, right? What was the reason for it being upset? Why were they being upset? Mr. Kerbal.
Because they created it.
Yeah, they created it. It wasn't they were upset because they couldn't. They had to pay taxes because they were drinking it. It's because they were making it. Farmers were paying already taxes for corn and for wheat, two ingredients that you need to make whiskey. Don't ask me how I know that. I know that. But then the farmers get taxed again for making whiskey. Man, triple threat right there of taxes. And so they kind of have good reason for being upset, right? They're paying so many taxes just to end up making a product that they're trying to use to sell and then make money. So, right? They're losing a lot of money. And it switches from being protest to being what kind of a...
Mob violence.
Yeah, violence. Number two.
Fearing an escalation of violence, Washington personally led over 13,000 soldiers to Pennsylvania. Washington claimed that he would not allow a small portion of the United States dictate to the whole Union. President Washington, accompanied by Alexander Hamilton, was successful in stopping the rebellion. By the time the president arrived, the presence of so many troops had scared the farmers into hiding. No battle ever took place.
All right, underline that last little bit. No battle ever took place. When you get done with that, can you tell me the difference between that and Shays Rebellion?
There was a battle in Shays Rebellion.
Yeah, there's a battle of Shays Rebellion. Did people end up dying in that one? Yeah.
Many people.
Yeah, many, I think it was like 8, and like 30 people got injured.
Is that a lot?
8 people dying is a lot. 30.
I'm trying to get my ideas.
No, you're good. You're good. Now, one thing I want you to understand about this: has anyone ever seen? I'm gonna assume that you've seen this, but if you haven't, has anyone seen the Avengers series? At least the parts where Has anyone heard of this guy named Thanos?
Yes.
Kind of big, purple, ugly dude or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a part in the series that I like. I can't remember at the end of which movie, but it's at the very end at the credits, and you see Thanos coming up to this vault after he's displeased of what's going on with his force of guys that he ends up sending. I think is it Iron Man?
Age of Ultron.
Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
And he reaches into his vault and he grabs this golden glove, and on there is the 5 slots for the Infinity Stones, and he says this kind of cool thing that says, "Fine, I'll do it myself."
Oh.
Hey, I like to think of George Washington kind of Thanos this situation. He's tired of the situation. He's like, "Look, I don't want another Shades Rebellion. I'm gonna do this myself." There's a book that I read. I cannot remember it for the life of me. You hear George Washington on there. They hear him speeding down the road there in New York on his white horse, saber just clacking against his body on his giant white horse, and he's commanding his troops and he's making sure they're ready. And as soon as they hear there in Pennsylvania that George Washington himself, the big boss himself, is coming into town to fix this, hey, they're like, "All right, I'm good with paying taxes. You good with paying taxes? Yeah, we'll pay the taxes." He took things into his own matters. I want you to look at one last little thing. That last little paragraph. Who's gonna read it? Mr. Graves, please read that, and we need to discuss that last little part.
While a battle did not occur, the Whiskey Rebellion was significant due to Washington's reaction. The rebellion was the first test to federal authority, and unlike Shays' Rebellion, resulted in strengthening the government of the United States. The Whiskey Rebellion reinforced the idea that the federal government had the authority to pass laws impacting all states.
Think back at Shays' Rebellion, all right? What did Shays' Rebellion end up doing? Why did we have Shays' Rebellion? To stop taxes, but why?
Because they're getting punished.
Yeah. What was our government then?
The articles.
Yeah, the Articles of Confederation. These farmers were upset because the articles weren't fair. Am I remembering that right? Yeah, they're upset. They're getting taxed, thrown in jail. They take their land, and then they get out of jail, and they're like, "Hey, you still need to pay your taxes." I don't have any land. They were upset about that, right? Daniel Shays got his boys, and they rebelled against it, and they lost a few people, but they made a difference. It made people like George Washington look at their government and say, "Hey, something needs to change." Compare that to what we just have right now in the Whiskey Rebellion. What ends up being shown?
The changes made to like how people get to treat other people. They don't have power over other people.
Close. Look at that passage again. That second sentence. Mr. Teal, read off that second sentence for me again.
Where?
On the very last paragraph. The rebellion.
The rebellion was the first test to federal authority, and unlike Shays' Rebellion, resulting in strengthening the government of the United States.
Thank you. It showed to the people of the United States, hey, look, we have a federalist government now. We have that good government that's actually what? What do the Federalists want? We have a strong central government, all right? People just can't go up and do these things. Taxes are being used for a good reason, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. But we'll see that it shows that, hey, we have a government now and it actually works. All right? So, out of that one, I'd probably underline that sentence itself to make sure. When you get done with that, flip over to your doodle notes onto that, to the other side that we didn't do.